Have you ever asked yourself, why does it hurt so much when all I did was love my child? Maybe you spent years trying to raise them with patience and care. You taught them right from wrong. You sacrificed sleep, time, even your own dreams, so they could have a better life. And now that they're grown, you find yourself dealing with criticism, blame, emotional distance, or even hostility. It's confusing. It's painful. And at times it feels like no one really talks about it. That's why we're here. Because there's a quiet struggle that many older parents face, but almost never share. A struggle that grows heavier with time. What do you do when your adult child treats you with disrespect, entitlement, or emotional cruelty, and shows no signs of changing? What do you do when they act as if your love, your kindness, your years of giving were never enough? We often hear about narcissistic partners or toxic coworkers. But what about when the narcissist is your own son or daughter? That's a different kind of heartbreak. That's a wound that runs deep. Now, I know that word, narcissist, can sound harsh. It's been overused in some ways, but when we strip it down to what it really means, it's about patterns. A consistent refusal to take responsibility. A hunger for control. A lack of empathy. The need to win every argument, to be seen as superior, and to manipulate others emotionally, especially the people closest to them. If this sounds like your child, please know that you're not alone. Many adult children who show narcissistic behavior don't just struggle with growing up. They refuse to. They demand help without gratitude. They drain your finances, your time, your peace of mind. Some never move out. Some do move out, but stay emotionally entangled, keeping you tied to their chaos from afar. And no matter what you say or how gently you say it, they flip the script, twist the truth, and make you feel like the villain. Some are cold and distant. Others are hot and explosive. One moment they're calling you names or ignoring you. The next, they're sweet-talking you to get what they want. You're left in a constant state of confusion, never quite sure where you stand. You question your memory, your judgment, even your worth. And here's the really tough part. Most parents in this situation are deeply loving, compassionate people. You may be someone who always tries to see the good in others, someone who wants harmony more than anything, someone who would rather suffer in silence than risk pushing your child further away. You might say to yourself, maybe if I'm more patient, maybe if I don't react, maybe they'll come around. But narcissistic behavior feeds off that silence. It thrives in spaces where boundaries are blurry and guilt is strong. And many parents, especially those of us who were raised to put our children first at all costs, fall into the trap of over-functioning. You do more. You give more. You bend yourself backwards to avoid conflict. But with every accommodation, your child demands more. With every sacrifice, they grow more entitled. And slowly, something inside you begins to wear down. The spark, the confidence, the sense that your home is truly your own. You start avoiding conversations to keep the peace. You minimize your needs. You tiptoe around their moods. But this isn't peace. It's survival. Let me say something clearly. Just because someone is your child doesn't mean they have the right to mistreat you. Being a parent does not mean being a doormat. Love is not meant to be used against you. It's okay to admit that you're hurting. It's okay to say that things aren't working. And it's okay to protect your space, even if the person causing the pain shares your last name. Now, many of us grew up in a time when parenting was seen as a lifelong duty, something we never stopped doing. But here's a truth we often forget. Once a child becomes an adult, they no longer need a parent. They need to take responsibility for themselves. Your role shifts. You're no longer the manager of their life. You're not here to fix them, save them, or endure endless emotional punishment. Some adult children weaponize guilt. They might bring up old wounds, accuse you of being the reason for their problems, or threaten to cut off contact if you don't meet their demands. These are powerful tactics. And they work, especially on parents who just want to feel connected again. You might find yourself thinking, I just want my child to love me again. But love that's based on fear, guilt, or control isn't love. It's manipulation. This isn't about giving up on your child. It's about waking up to the truth of what's happening. And once you begin to see the patterns, you can begin to take back your power. Not by fighting, not by begging, but by slowly returning to yourself. That starts with understanding. Understanding that narcissistic behavior thrives in relationships without boundaries. Understanding that your emotional exhaustion isn't weakness. It's a signal that something needs to change. Understanding that you have the right to choose peace over pain, because your life still matters. Your joy still matters. And you deserve to feel safe, respected, and free. No matter what age you are, or who your child has become. Some of the most confusing moments in your relationship with a narcissistic adult child aren't always the big blow-ups. They're the small, everyday interactions that leave you feeling unsettled, belittled, or invisible. And yet you can't quite put your finger on why. It might be the way they sigh when you speak, the way they roll their eyes when you make a suggestion, the subtle jabs, the dismissive tone, the way they act like you're always in the wrong, even when you're just trying to help. These aren't just bad habits. Over time, they become tools of emotional control. You may have noticed that your child always seems to need the last word. Or they talk about you in the third person while you're standing right there, as if you're not even in the room. Mom doesn't understand how things work. Or, Dad's always overreacting. They'll say, and it stings. It's meant to. That kind of communication is not accidental. It's a tactic. It puts you in a lower position, makes you feel small, and keeps them in control. Control is the key word here. Adult, narcissistic children don't always shout or dominate in obvious ways. Sometimes they manipulate by underfunctioning, refusing to take responsibility, creating constant chaos, and leaving you to clean up the mess. You may find yourself doing everything for them. Handling their paperwork, paying their bills, driving them around. And yet, no matter how much you do, it's never enough. They may even blame you for the very things they refuse to manage themselves. And when you try to set limits or say no, the response can be swift and cruel. They may explode in anger, give you the silent treatment, or start attacking your character. Not because you've done something wrong, but because your boundaries threaten their sense of power. They don't want partnership. They want control. One tactic they often use is deflection. You bring up something hurtful they've said or done, and instead of listening, they immediately change the subject. Usually by pointing out something you did years ago. You ask them to take responsibility for a broken promise, and suddenly you're defending your parenting from when they were 6. It's a distraction. A way to avoid accountability while keeping you stuck in the past. And it works, especially when you're someone who naturally reflects on your actions and wants to make things right. Another common behavior is rhetorical criticism. They ask questions that sound like curiosity, but are really meant to undermine you. Why are you wearing that? You're still using that phone? Why did you arrange the living room like that? These aren't innocent observations. They're veiled put-downs, and over time, they chip away at your confidence. Then there's the issue of fake concern. They might suddenly act worried about your health, your memory, your choices, but only in ways that make you feel weak or incapable. I'm just concerned, Mom. Maybe you shouldn't be driving anymore. Or, Dad, do you even remember what we talked about last week? Again, it's not real support. It's control dressed up as care. And perhaps one of the hardest things to accept is this: they rarely feel genuine guilt. If they hurt your feelings, they might offer a half-hearted apology. "I'm sorry you feel that way," which places the blame right back on you. They don't own their actions. They don't reflect. They don't try to make it right unless it benefits them. For someone like you, someone who cares deeply, who remembers birthdays, who apologizes when you're wrong, this emotional coldness can feel unbearable. And yet, when they want something, money, a favor, a place to stay, they can suddenly become charming, affectionate, even generous. They know how to turn it on. You might feel like the child you used to know is back again. But as soon as they get what they came for, the warmth disappears. You're left confused, maybe even hopeful that things are improving, until the cycle repeats. It's a roller coaster, and it's exhausting. Not just emotionally, but physically, mentally, spiritually. You may start to feel like you're the one going crazy, like maybe you're imagining things. But you're not. These behaviors are real. They're patterned, and they have a name. So where does this leave you? For many parents in this situation, the instinct is to keep trying, to fix the relationship, to explain yourself better, to hold out hope that one day they'll understand. But there's something important I want you to hear. You are allowed to stop hoping for a breakthrough and start hoping for peace. That doesn't mean giving up. It means shifting your focus from trying to change them to taking care of you, from managing their emotions to managing your own energy, from constantly reacting to consciously choosing how and when to engage. Because here's something most parents forget. You're not dealing with a child anymore. You're dealing with an adult. And that means you're not obligated to keep playing the same role you played when they were 5 or 15. You are allowed to step back. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to stop explaining. You might say, "But they're my child." Yes, they are. And you'll likely never stop loving them. But love without boundaries becomes captivity. And if your child cannot respect you, it is not your job to keep sacrificing yourself in the hope that one day they will. This is where the real healing begins. Not by waiting for them to treat you better, but by deciding you no longer have to accept mistreatment as a condition of love. That's a powerful step, and you have every right to take it. There comes a point when you realize the cycle has gone on too long. The late-night stress, the guilt you can't explain, the way your heart sinks when the phone rings or when it doesn't. You've tried reasoning, you've tried patience, and you've tried love in every language you know, but nothing seems to change. If you're at that point, I want to say something very clearly. It is not too late to reclaim your peace. It is not too late to protect your heart. And it is not too late to choose yourself. Not in anger, not in revenge, but in truth. Healing begins with permission. Permission to stop living on emotional high alert. Permission to let go of the idea that love always means giving more. Permission to say, "I've done enough. I am enough." And part of that healing journey is understanding something most of us were never taught. Your identity is not defined by your child's behavior. Your worth is not determined by how much they appreciate you. Whether they praise you or blame you, you are still you. You are a person with wisdom, kindness, value, and a lifetime of lessons to share. That doesn't disappear just because someone you love refuses to see it. You might be wondering, where do I even start? After so many years of feeling enmeshed in your child's chaos, it can be hard to find your footing again. But there are some gentle, practical steps you can begin to take. First, learn to recognize when you're being pulled into old patterns. Does every conversation feel like you're being baited into defending yourself? Do you find yourself saying yes when you really want to say no, just to keep the peace? That's the moment to pause. Not to lash out, but to breathe and choose differently. It's okay to say, I need to think about that before I give an answer. It's okay to say, that doesn't work for me. You don't owe anyone an instant response, especially if that response costs you your dignity or your well-being. Next, begin rebuilding the boundaries that may have slowly eroded over time. Think of boundaries not as walls, but as doors you open and close with intention. You get to decide who enters, how long they stay, and how they treat you while they're there. If your child still lives with you and contributes nothing, no respect, no help, no accountability, you are allowed to set conditions for them to stay. You're allowed to say, if you want to live here, these are the expectations. If not, you will need to find another place to live. That's not cruelty. That's healthy structure. And adults should live like adults. If they've become emotionally abusive, shouting, threatening, gaslighting, you can protect yourself by limiting contact. That might mean shorter visits, only meeting in public spaces, or in some cases, choosing no contact at all for a while. You don't have to explain this to anyone who hasn't lived your story. You don't need their permission. You only need your own clarity. And speaking of clarity, it's helpful to work with someone who truly understands narcissistic dynamics. A coach, therapist, or support group that doesn't just give generic advice, but helps you untangle the deep emotional knots you've carried for years. You don't have to carry this alone anymore. There are safe spaces where you can speak freely, be understood, and find tools that actually help. Many parents also carry a heavy layer of shame, guilt, or even a fear of abandonment. These feelings didn't start with your child. They often go back much further. Maybe your own upbringing taught you to accept poor treatment, or made you believe that love and pain were inseparable. Healing means going back to those roots, not to stay stuck there, but to finally set yourself free. This journey also involves grieving, not just the pain, but the dream. The dream of the child you thought they'd grow into, the relationship you hoped you'd have by now. The future you pictured when they were young and you believed love alone would be enough. Let yourself grieve that loss. It's real. And then begin to live fully in the reality you're in now. That reality may include hard choices, and those choices might feel unnatural at first, especially for those of us who are used to giving endlessly. But I want to ask you something. What would it feel like to go to bed at night without that knot in your stomach? To enjoy your morning without scanning for the next text message full of blame? To laugh again, really laugh, without wondering if it's selfish? That's what healing makes possible. And as you move forward, focus less on them and more on you. What brings you calm? What fills your spirit? What makes you feel alive, curious, and free? These aren't small things. These are your life. Your child may never say thank you. They may never change. But your peace does not depend on their growth. It depends on yours. If you ever feel doubt creeping back in, remember this. Boundaries are not punishments. They are acts of love. Saying enough is not abandonment. It's emotional survival. And choosing distance when closeness means pain is not rejection. It's wisdom. You are not alone in this. There are many, many parents walking this same road. Quietly, bravely, painfully. And just like you, they deserve a life with less drama and more dignity. Before we end today, I want to leave you with this. You are not just someone's parent. You are a full, whole person. You've lived, you've endured, and you've given more than most people will ever know. You don't have to keep proving your love by accepting disrespect. Your love has already been proven over a lifetime. Now it's time to offer some of that love back to yourself. Take a deep breath. You're allowed to let go. You're allowed to feel peace. And most of all, you're allowed to heal. If this video spoke to your heart, I invite you to share your story in the comments below. You never know who might need to read your words. And if you found comfort here, please consider liking this video and subscribing to Strong Elderly Life for more honest, empowering conversations like this one. You're not alone. And this chapter of life still holds peace, strength, and joy. On your terms. Here's to living your truth with grace, no matter your age.